So you've done some marketing for some off-market motivated seller leads. Some leads have started to come in. You've had some conversations with sellers, and now you finally set up an appointment to do a walkthrough with a seller at a property that you feel like could be an excellent deal. How do you make sure that you don't screw this up? What are the things you should say? What are the things you shouldn't say? I'm about to talk through that here at this property that we just purchased just a couple days ago. And beyond being a gutted property that's just a cool place for a video, I think it's also cool because I was just here 2.5 weeks ago and I went over these exact components with the seller, and it led to us getting a deal 2 weeks later. So let's talk about the 3 components that lead to an excellent property walkthrough with a home seller. Let's go. Hey, I'm Kirby Atwell from Living Off Rentals, where we believe high quality rental properties like this one that we just bought 3 days ago are the best investments a person can make. So this might not be totally high quality yet, but it's on its way because we got a great deal on it, and that's one of the most important aspects. We just bought it 3 days ago and my guys just cleared out everything. We're starting over and we're about to build in a whole bunch of value and a whole bunch of equity. I love investing in rental properties. I've been doing it for the last 14 years or so, and I make videos like this on a weekly basis to help you overcome what's holding you back from building your own portfolio. And you know, I'm just some schmuck who's been doing this for a little while, and it's pretty much totally changed my life. And so I love sharing the lessons that I've learned and some of the mistakes that I've made over the years so that you can hopefully learn from those mistakes, not make them yourself. So if you want similar videos like this on rental property investing, hit the subscribe button, hit the little bell next to it, and you'll be notified when new videos are released. So the way the process typically works is you do some marketing for deals, whether that's online marketing or bandit signs or direct mail, or like this one, this came from a Facebook lead. And sellers start calling you, and you talk to the sellers and you weed out all the ones that you can't help. You know, hopefully you can refer those out to a realtor or somebody else that can help them with their situation. And then you set up appointments with the sellers of the top property leads. And that leads us to this video where I'm going to talk about the 3 main components of a property walkthrough. So before I get into the things you should say and the things you shouldn't say when you're doing a walkthrough, I want to quick talk about what the seller sees when they first open the door. How do you physically present yourself? They say it's some crazy number like, I don't know, 50 or 60% of communication is nonverbal. Maybe it's even higher than that. I don't remember the exact statistic, but it's a lot. It's a lot of it's nonverbal. It's physically what they see. And so I'm not saying that you should wear the Step Brothers tuxedo t-shirt that shows that you're serious, but you're still here to party. But what I am saying is that you should wear a decent shirt, maybe a polo shirt with your logo on it, or you know, a button-up shirt that's sort of like a work shirt that shows that, you know, you're professional and you might have the money actually to buy this property, and you might also have the skill to rehab the property and know what to do with it once you bought it. So getting that balance right is sometimes a little tricky, but just try to remember to look presentable. The second component that a lot of people don't do, it surprises me how many people don't do this, is smile. You gotta smile when you're talking to the seller. So check out the difference. I walk up to the door, the seller opens the door, and I say, "Hi, we talked on the phone. I'm here to buy your house." How do you think a seller is going to respond to that? Does it make you feel warm, like you want to work with that person? Or if they open the door and I have a little bit of a smile, not like a huge cheesy smile, but just something that's inviting, and I say, "Hey, I'm Kirby Atwell. We talked on the phone. I'm here to do a walkthrough of your house and get you an offer." Don't you feel that makes the seller feel a little more comfortable to invite you into their house if you don't present yourself like a homeless serial killer? All right, so the first thing I want to do is set the stage for what a successful property walkthrough looks like. And I think there's sort of a misconception around this. I think a lot of people feel that it's only success if you get a signed contract at the end of a walkthrough. And you know, I don't know, maybe other people are different, but for me, that's typically the rarity. Typically I'm not getting a contract at the end of the walkthrough. I feel sort of like that's asking someone to marry you on the first date. It's not something you're probably going to do. You're probably going to want to get to know somebody, build some rapport, build a relationship, build trust, and then have somebody sign on the dotted line. So I don't typically try to get a property under contract. That's not my first intent. Sometimes I do get a property under contract. If somebody is just really ready to go in their situation, then yes, I will sign a contract right then and there. That's great. But a lot of times in the past when I would get a property under contract because I'd really push for it, when I'd leave, the seller would tell a family member, hey, I've just got my property under contract to sell, and they'd ask them how much it was for, and they'd talk them out of it. They'd say, oh, that's not a deal, and they'd talk them out of it, so then they'd want to come back and renegotiate anyway. So that's not my first intent. The first intent of a successful property walkthrough, in my opinion, is figuring out exactly what the seller's problem is that you can solve. If you can figure that out in detail, not you assume that after you do a little bit of walkthrough and you've asked them a question or two. It takes lots of questions. You really want to understand their situation. And if you can figure that out, that's the first priority of a successful walkthrough. So don't overlook this aspect, because this is how you're going to tailor your offer. It's going to be based on that seller's specific situation. So if the seller wants to sell fast, hey, I can do that, because unlike other buyers, we have cash available and we can close quickly. You might have to bend on the price a little bit, but it's going to be custom tailored to a person that wants to sell quickly. So I actually have a deal under contract right now that's really a great example of this. It's a deal that I typically wouldn't purchase. I target really ugly properties like this one, so that I can do rehab and I can build in equity. So there's a guy who had really over improved for the area. He knew that he had put way too much money in. He wasn't going to get it out, but he had a gorgeous house, and it would make a really great rental property, a good Airbnb rental property actually. So I looked into his financing on the property, because that's public record. You can see how he financed the property, and I found out it was a VA loan just a few years ago, and he locked in it was like a 3% rate. It was crazy low rate, and his total payment with taxes is $780. So it's crazy how low his payment is. So with that low of a payment, if I Airbnb the property, it's going to Airbnb on average of about $2,000 per month. So the cash flow on this property is going to be crazy high. So I'm willing to give up. I'll have a little bit of equity when we close, but I'm willing to give up the big chunk of equity that I typically get from doing a nice rehab on a property, because I've got this big spread on the cash flow. And by the way, you don't have to be a veteran to assume a VA loan. Most people don't realize that, and VA loans are a super cheap form of financing. So if you see a VA loan on a property, that may be a great option for you, is just to take over the existing loan. And this is not the most comfortable bucket to sit on. So in order to understand why a seller truly wants to sell has to do with my second point, and that is the 3 components of solid communication with the seller, which are building rapport, creating connections, and asking the right questions. So the key to effective rapport building is understanding that people want to work with somebody that they can relate to, that makes them feel good, right? So what you want to do when you walk into a property is you want to start to figure out what you can admire about this person, about what it might be their situation. Maybe they're the executor of a will and they're taking care of it really quickly and they're taking care of it with detail. Or maybe it's the house. There's certain components of the house that are really cool, and so you can compliment on those components of the house. There's always something that you can admire about everyone. So start looking for those items and let them know. They want to hear what you admire. If you just walk through the property and you're like, oh, okay, cool, yeah, and taking notes, you're not really building a relationship with that seller. And you kind of need a relationship when they're selling one of the most expensive things that they're ever going to sell. So one way to quickly build a relationship is to let them know what you admire about them, and it helps to build that rapport. The second
What a twist!
The second component to solid communication with the seller is creating connections, letting them know that you're a human being, that this isn't just a transaction. So when you're walking around, you see golf clubs in the corner and you're like, hey, who is the golfer? You know, I was on the golf team in high school. Is it something you love doing? I love doing it. You know, or maybe you see a picture frame and you're like, hey, oh wow, this guy's in a Navy uniform. You know, I served in the Army. Or my grandpa was in the Navy in World War II. You know, you can create connections without actually being the person who's totally relatable to that situation. You know, it could be your friend who's a good golfer, or it could be your grandpa who served in the Navy. But there's always connections that you can create with people to let them know that you're not just there because it's a transaction. You're totally present with them and you're treating them as a human being. And the final component of solid communication is asking the right questions. And what I mean by asking the right questions is framing the question in a way so that they understand that you're going to be bringing value. So when you're talking to someone and they say, hey, I want to move quickly, you say, oh, would it help you if I had a trash company that could come in and they could just get rid of all this stuff for you, so you wouldn't have to clean out any of this stuff. We could donate what somebody else could use, and then we'll just get rid of the rest. Or maybe they mention that they want a certain price, and so you can dig into that by asking questions and say, well, how did you come up with that price? Tell me, have you looked at the sold comps in this area? Do you know what your neighbor sold for down the street? You know, you can ask these questions to make them start to think about how you would come up with the price that you're going to offer them. Because maybe it was just a pie in the sky type of number that they just pulled out of thin air. And so you can start asking questions to help frame how you would come up with your offer, and that will plant a seed in their mind to start doing some of those things so they can see that you're not way off base when you give them your offer. So speaking of how to give offers, that brings me to my last point, and that is how to submit an offer to an unrealistic seller.
Surely you can't be serious.
I am serious. And don't call me Shirley.
Now, this doesn't always happen right on the spot, right there. Like I talked about, a lot of times I don't walk away with a contract. Sometimes I'll just say, hey, I need to do a little more research, because I do need to do a little bit more research. Maybe I need to look at the comps. Maybe I need to go back and really add up my repair costs, because I took a bunch of pictures and, you know, I can go back and look at the pictures and come up with a more detailed repair cost estimate. But there's two main ways that I submit offers. The first one being what I call the takeaway offer, and the second one being a yes and offer. So when it comes to the takeaway offer, it's human psychology that if you're trying to sell someone on why they should sell you their house for a certain price, and you're trying to convince them of that, then they're the one sort of in the driver's seat, because you know you're the one that's working on selling them, as opposed to them selling you on why you should buy their property. So a lot of times what I do is I say, look, I understand you wanted $200,000 for this house. I can't give you $200,000. And maybe at that point I just say, I'm probably not your buyer. You know, I just can't get anywhere close to that. And that surprises them, and they say, oh, okay, well, all right. And then inevitably they're going to ask next, well, what would you give me for the property? So when they come back to you and ask you that question, you can say, well, based on all the rehab that I have to do, and based on all the sold comps in your specific neighborhood, the best that I could do is $140,000. Now, they're asking you for your offer, as opposed to you calling them and saying, hey, here's your offer, $140,000. It's just a slight change to the psychological dynamic, and what it does is it makes them more receptive to your offer, as opposed to being super defensive when you submit your offer. So the other type of offer that's worked really well for me over the years is the yes and offer. So the way this works is I call them back and I say, all right, you said you wanted $140,000 for this property. I can get really close at $130,000 if you can do X, Y, and Z. So if you can replace the furnace before I purchase it, or if you can have the siding and windows replaced, or if you can do owner financing, I can give you $130,000. So typically you're going to be pretty close, if not at their number, but you're going to add in some really pretty significant value add items like owner financing, or some pretty decent sized repairs. So maybe they're willing to have these repairs done before you purchase the property, because it gets them to that number that they're really stuck on, or at least close to that number. There you have it, the 3 components that I consider most when I'm doing a walkthrough with a home seller. If you got value out of this video, please give it the thumbs up. I'd be super grateful. Also, like I mentioned at the top of this video, if you want other similar videos to this on rental property investing related topics, please subscribe and hit the little bell next to it. So I know I already said finally, but last but not least, comment in the comments below. Let me know if there's a topic of revolving around rental property investing that you'd like to see me do a video on. I'd love to know what you're interested in. Thank you again for joining me, and I will see you in the next video.